Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot, and today we will continue to read from this very important book entitled Our Authorized Bible Vindicated. Our Authorized Bible, meaning the King James Bible, Vindicated, okay? And it is written by Benjamin G. Wilkinson. And if you haven't joined us before, if you are new to this channel, you will know that we have already taken the position that there are two streams of Bible. You know, the Catholic Church would have you believe that there is only one, in the same way that they want to claim that their church is the only church. It's the only Christian church. Yeah, that may be a surprise to some of the Protestants out there. If you haven't heard this before, you need to wake up and realize that the Catholic Church believes that. The leaders of these Protestant churches may want to, make friends with the Catholic Church, and have fellowship with their leaders, the Protestant leaders with the Catholic leaders. But remember this, dear brothers and sisters, the Catholic Church does not recognize the Protestant churches as true Christian churches. Okay? They believe their church is the only church, when in reality it is a pagan church. Okay? In principle, their doctrines are pagan. Catholicism is baptized paganism. But they would have you believe that their church is the only church, the only Christian church. Even though some Catholics won't call themselves Christians, they'll call themselves Catholics. But anyway, that's a little bit beyond the pale of this video. So today we will be discussing the history of the true Bible versus the Catholic Bible. Now, indeed, this is not the full history. This is part of the history. So, here we go in this chapter here. Onward then pushed those heroic bands of evangelists to England, to southern France, and northern Italy. These evangelists being those who received their Bibles from the apostles, okay, translated into their own languages. The Mediterranean was like the trunk of a tree with branches running out to these parts, the roots of the tree being in Judea or Asia Minor. From thence the sap flowed westward to fertilize the distant lands. History does not possess any record of heroism superior to the sacrifices and sufferings of the early Christians in the pagan West. The first believers of ancient Britain nobly held their ground when the pagan Anglo-Saxons descended on the land like a flood. Dean Stanley holds it against Augustine, the missionary sent by the Pope in 596 A.D. to convert England, that he treated with contempt the early Christian Britain. So whenever this famous missionary and theologian Augustine, when he was sent by the Pope to Britain, he treated with contempt those early Christian Britons. Yes, more. He connived with the Anglo-Saxons, which were pagans, in their frightful extermination of that pious people. And that's what the Catholic Church does. It will connive with the wicked in order to take down the righteous, God's people. And after Augustine's death, when those same pagan Anglo-Saxons so terrified the papal leaders in England that they fled back to Rome, it was the British Christians of Scotland who occupied the forsaken fields. It is evident from this that British Christianity did not come from Rome. Furthermore, Dr. Adam Clark claims that the extermination of Irish customs reveals that they have elements which were imported into Ireland from Asia Minor by early Christians. Since Italy, France, and Great Britain were once provinces of the Roman Empire, the first translations of the Bible by the early Christians in those parts were made into Latin. The early Latin translations were very dear to the hearts of these primitive churches, and as Rome did not send any missionaries toward the West before 250 A.D., the early Latin Bibles were well established before these churches came into conflict with Rome. So they already had the true Bible handed down to them by the apostles before Rome came to Britain. Not only were such translations in existence long before the Vulgate was adopted by the papacy and well established, but the people for centuries refused to supplant their old Latin Bibles by the Vulgate. The old Latin versions were used longest by the Western Christians who would not bow to the authority of Rome, e.g. the Donatists, the Irish in Ireland, Britain, and the continent, the Albigenses, etc. God, in His wisdom, had invested these Latin versions by His providence with a charm that outweighed the learned artificiality of Jerome's Vulgate. This is why they often persisted through the centuries. A characteristic often overlooked in considering versions, and one that cannot be too highly emphasized, needs to be pointed out in comparing the Latin Bible of the Waldenses, of the Gauls, and of the Celts with the later Vulgate. To bring before you the unusual charm of those Latin Bibles, I quote from the Forum of June 1887, quote, "The old italic version into the rude Low Latin of the 2nd century held its own as long as Latin continued to be the language of the people. The critical version of Jerome never displaced it, and only replaced it when the Latin ceased to be a living language and became the language of the learned. The Gothic version of the Ulfilas in the same way held its own until the tongue in which it was written ceased to exist. Luther's Bible was the first genuine beginning of modern German literature." Let me repeat that. Luther's Bible was the first genuine beginning of modern German literature. And you can really say the same about the William Tyndale's Bible. Okay, his was like the beginning, the first genuine beginning of English literature. In Germany, as in England, many critical translations have been made, but they have fallen stillborn from the press. The reason of these facts seems to be this: that the languages into which these versions were made were almost perfectly adapted to express the broad, generic simplicity of the original text. Microscopic accuracy of phrase and classical nicety of expression may be very well for the student in his closet, but they do not represent the human and divine simplicity of the Scriptures to the mass of those for whom the Scriptures were written. To render that, the translator needs not only a simplicity of mind rarely to be found in companies of learned critics, but also a language possessing in some large measure that broad, simple, and generic character which we have seen to belong to the Hebrew and to the Greek of the New Testament. It is partly because the Low Latin of the 2nd century and the Gothic of the Ulfilas and the rude, strong German of Luther had that character in a remarkable degree that they were capable of rendering the Scriptures with a faithfulness which guaranteed their permanence. And I may be saying it in just a crude way here, but what he's trying to explain here is that in some translations they have this high, I'll call it highfalutin language. Okay, that may be a wrong term, but this highfalutin language, this fancy language, but the language of the Bible was originally written in simple language, okay, written for the common people, because you remember in the Gospels it says that the common people followed Jesus gladly, okay. They heard, I'm sorry, yes, my wife corrected me. The common people heard Jesus gladly because he spoke in simple language that not only a child could, say it this way, he spoke in language that not only the great minds could understand, the very intelligent adult minds could understand, but also a little child could understand. Okay? And theologians don't do that. You read their writings, the theologians, they are always using this fancy language, and they're using words that the common person doesn't even understand. And so the so-called educated people, they look down upon the people who haven't gone to the schools that they have, the colleges and universities that they have. They look down on them. Oh, you don't understand the things we understand. You're not learned like us. Jesus did not use highfalutin language, complicated language. And he didn't use it as the Holy Spirit didn't use it as the Holy Spirit inspired the prophets to write the Scriptures. Okay, so we're done with that quote. Going on here from the words by B.G. Wilkinson. For 900 years, we are told, the first Latin translations held their own after the Vulgate appeared. The Vulgate was born about 380 A.D. That's the Catholic Bible. 900 years later brings us to about 1280 A.D. This accords well with the fact that at the famous Council of Toulouse in 1229 A.D., the Pope gave orders for the most terrible crusade to be waged against the simple Christians of southern France and northern Italy who would not bow to his power. Cruel, relentless, devastating, this war was waged, destroying the Bibles, books, and every vestige of documents to tell the story of the Waldenses and Albigenses. If you have to destroy another person because of he has one version of the Bible that you don't like, that proves that they, the people that you are persecuting and killing, are right and you are wrong. Since then, some authorities speak of the Waldenses as having as their Bible the Vulgate. We regret to dispute these claims, but when we consider that the Waldenses were, so to speak, in their mountain fastnesses on an island in the midst of a sea of nations using the Vulgate, without doubt they knew and possessed the Vulgate, but the italic, the earlier Latin, was their own Bible, the one for which they lived and suffered and died. Moreover, to the east was Constantinople, the center of Greek Catholicism, whose Bible was the received text, which is, again, I say, the ancestor of the King James, while a little farther east was the noble Syrian church, which also had the received text. In touch with these, northern Italy could easily verify her text. It is very evident that the Latin Bible of early British Christianity not only was not the Latin Bible of the papacy, that is, the Vulgate, but it was at such variance with the Vulgate as to engender strife. Yes, it was so different from the papacy's Bible that it caused strife between them. So don't tell me that there aren't two streams of Bibles. The following quotation from Dr. von Dobschultz will verify these two facts. Quote, when Pope Gregory found some Anglo-Saxon youths at the slave market of Rome and perceived that in the north there was still a pagan nation to be baptized, he sent one of his monks to England, and this monk, who was St. Augustine, so-called saint, took with him the Bible and introduced it to the Anglo-Saxons. And one of his followers brought with him from Rome pictures showing the biblical history and decorated the walls of the church in the monastery at Wearmouth. We do not enter here into the difficult question of the relations between this newly founded Anglo-Saxon church and the old Irish-Scottish church. Differences of Bible text had something to do with the pitiful struggles which arose between the churches and ended in the devastation of the older one. Yes, because they had different Bible texts, different versions of the Bible, and that had a lot to do with the struggles that arose between the churches. Famous in history among, and that's unquote, that's the end of that quote. Famous in history among all centers of Bible knowledge in Christianity was Iona, on the little island of Hye, that's H-Y, off the northwest coast of Scotland. Its most historic figure was Columba. Upon this island rock, God breathed out his Holy Spirit, and from this center to the tribes of northern Europe. When Rome awoke to the necessity of sending out missionaries to extend her power, she found Great Britain and northern Europe already professing a Christianity whose origin could be traced back through Iona to Asia Minor. Think about that. When Rome awoke to the necessity of sending out missionaries to extend her power, guess what? She found Great Britain and northern Europe already professing a Christianity whose origin could be traced back through Iona, this island off the northwest coast of Scotland, to Asia Minor. Long distance. About 600 A.D., Rome sent About 600 A.D., Rome sent missionaries to England and to Germany to bring these simple Bible Christians under her dominion, as much as to subdue the pagans. De Bonnier, if I'm pronouncing that French name correctly, has furnished us this picture of Iona and her missions. Quote, De Bonnier says that Columba esteemed the cross of Christ higher than the royal blood which flowed in his veins, and that previous manuscripts were brought to Iona, where a theological school was founded and the Word was studied. Ere long, a missionary spirit breathed over this ocean rock, so justly named the light of the Western world. British missionaries carried the light of the gospel to the Netherlands, France, Switzerland, Germany, yea, even into Italy, and did more for the conversion of Central Europe than the half-enslaved Roman Church. We will stop our reading of this very important book, Our Authorized Bible Vindicated, for now. We will continue the reading of this book in our next presentation, but in the meantime, if you agree with this presentation, we would highly encourage you to tap that like button so that this presentation can be sent far and wide to those who are hungering and thirsting for truth, for the bread of life. And if you have any questions or comments, then please, I would invite you to place them at the bottom of this video. And if you haven't subscribed, we would highly encourage you to do so if you appreciate this type of content. Thank you for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. Have a good day in the Lord.